Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Carroll, co founder and chief product officer at Clever. It is such an honor and privilege to be able to have a conversation today with Sal Khan, one of my personal heroes and educational source of inspiration. When I was a middle school science teacher, Sal, your videos were both a critical part of my teaching, but also your thinking really helped me evolve how I thought about pedagogy and how I interacted with my students. So I'm really excited to be able to talk with you today and hopefully inspire some teachers to try new things and experiment in their classroom. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Yourself?
Fantastic. So to kick things off, I'm so thrilled that our organizations, Clever and Khan Academy, are working together. And I was wondering if you might just be able to share a little bit about why it was important for you and the Khan Academy team to partner with Clever.
Yeah, it's funny when I remember when Clever first started and said, yeah, there are these folks who are attacking the login and the rostering issues, and I'm like, what issues are there? This doesn't seem. and then and then, um, and then I think over the years, especially as we started to work more closely with schools and school districts, and frankly, I started a school myself called Khan Lab School. Um,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, oh, this is a big problem for a lot of folks, and on both sides. If you're a teacher or a school administrator and you're using all of these different resources with all different logins, and you want to put the right protections in place and connect it to the student rostering, how do you do that? And then if you're on the other side, if you're a Khan Academy, if you're a Alexia, if you're an assessment provider,
Yeah.
how do you make it easy for people to connect into what is going on? And so, when I'm so happy that you guys have been thinking about this problem longer than us, because as we've gone into more meaningful, deeper engagements with classrooms and schools, if not for being able to lean heavily on Clever, I don't think we would be able to reach as many students and teachers with the impact that we want.
Yeah, well, it's been such an honor and privilege for us to be able to support your work, and we know so many teachers and administrators, reached out with expressions of joy and gratitude when we got to announce our partnership. It's been fantastic. So today our conversation is really going to be about for educators and talking about how they can grow and innovate in their practice. But before we get into some of the ways that that can happen, I know some of the teachers who are watching us right now might be feeling like, oh, like I'm so exhausted. I just don't know if I have the energy to try something new or to experiment in my classroom. I know that when I was in the classroom, I felt that way very, very often. And so I was just curious, Sal, what would you say to those teachers who might be watching us but aren't sure if they have the resources to try something new?
Yeah, well, I'd say a few things. One, it's like those emergency videos for planes. You always have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And I think teachers and parents, people in roles like this, oftentimes forget that, and they're so in service to students and so in service to other people that they can forget about their own well being. So I would say that's step one. For me, meditation has been has been a big role in my life, and so I highly recommend it, which could literally just be sitting still and letting your mind slowly still. It's nothing more exotic than that. But then getting a little bit more into the material realm. What I remind folks is it should never be innovation for innovation's sake. It should never be change for change's sake. It should never be technology for technology's sake. As an educator, you just got to take stock of like what is working well for me as a teacher, what is working well for my students and for the families, and then what are some of the core needs that seem like they're not working well, and then think about how you can solve it. Now, you might be able to solve some of them with pencil and paper or a spreadsheet or something that you could already slip in quite quickly, or you might realize that, hey, there's some interesting tools that could help solve that. And I think when you take that mindset, then you don't feel like you're forcing technology. You don't force like you're forcing a solution that might have a problem, and then you're like, okay, this is a real thing, and let me now try it out. I think the other thing is be comfortable with failure. This growth mindset. It's very in vogue to talk about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, that we should all be stepping out of our comfort zone, that failure is not a negative thing, that's a sign that we're stepping out of our comfort zone. It's an opportunity for growth. But I do think I talk a lot about in the system sometimes when grades are final, maybe we're undermining a growth mindset. We should let the kids keep working on it so that they can get to that level of mastery. I think oftentimes we as adults don't give ourselves permission, or we don't give the permission to other adults to fail, or at least don't make it clear that it's okay if you fail. So I think some of the fear of change or trying new things, which might be technology, are, well, what if this doesn't work? What if we take a step back? How will people view me? Et cetera, et cetera. But I think we just all have to create more space for ourselves and for other people to not feel that way.
Yeah. How can we possibly teach our students to really embrace growth mindset without modeling that ourselves and showing ourselves, being vulnerable and making mistakes and learning as a result of it? I love that so much.
If I was a school leader, I would say, what I would celebrate. What have you failed at? Go across the entire faculty. What have you failed at? Let's celebrate that, because if you're not failing that means you're not pushing the envelope.
Yeah. I also love your approach of let's ground our innovation and our professional development in problems, or opportunities to make our classroom better. Let's not just try things for the sake of trying things. Let's really focus on the most critical problems. And I know one challenge that I've heard from so many teachers, especially over the past year, is about relationships and getting close to students. And one of the things that often comes up in the context of using technology, I think there's a perception that if we bring technology and tech applications into our classrooms, it might distance teachers and students. It might get in the way of us having those personal connections that we know are so important to learning. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, and to hear if you have some ideas or suggestions about how teachers can use ed tech tools to build stronger relationships with their students.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be the first to say, if I had to pick between amazing technology and an amazing in-person experience with an amazing teacher, for myself, for my own children, or for anyone's children, I would pick the latter any day of the week. And so it really shouldn't be a trade-off. It should really be what we were just talking about. What are the needs, the opportunities, and then what are the tools? And the tools might be chalk, it might be a ball, or it might be Khan Academy, it might be Clever, it might be or some combination of technology. And our principle at Khan Academy, a lot of folks know this all started with me tutoring my cousins remotely, and then making some dashboards for myself as a tutor. I always viewed it as, can I make tools that can unlock the human experience? And when I think about the opportunity or the problem you're trying to solve, when we had mass public education, which was a huge utopian idea, and we, sometimes it's easy to throw darts at the education system, but I always remind folks, 300 years ago, it was not mainstream for most people to be able to read. It was not mainstream for most people to understand algebra. Society took a huge bet, and it's no coincidence that the societies that took the bet earliest were the first to develop a broad-based middle class. But there had to be some compromises. If you're going to provide mass free education, you couldn't necessarily personalize the way that if you are a duke or a prince, the type of education that you might have gotten 500 years ago. You had 30 kids in a room. You essentially have to deliver one thing to all 30 kids, even though every teacher knows that all 30 of those students have different needs, different gaps. Every teacher wishes they could copy themselves so that they could have 30 one-on-one sessions with those 30 students in the room. But that just historically hasn't been practical from a resource point of view. And so I see there's an opportunity with technology to, one, potentially take some frictions off the table so that you free up more teacher or more student time and energy, but also provide mechanisms where some of what if we're calling information delivery or practice, if it can start happening at students' own time and pace, if it can start happening in a more efficient way, and the teacher has more information, more data, then they're going to be empowered to do what they've always wanted to do. Sit next to those 3 kids who are having difficulty, who, no matter how good the ed tech tool is, they're still stuck. And it might not be an academic issue, it might not be an intellectual issue, it might be a social emotional issue, which only the teacher is going to be able to solve and really diagnose. And so they're able to have a more personal connection with those 3-4 kids, while the other 25, 26 are able to work at their own time and pace. And then they can go and work with another 5 or 6 kids on another issue. And then even those other 25 kids, maybe pair them up in interesting ways. So they're able to do projects, they're able to tutor each other, they're able to unstick each other. And this type of reality is actually a far more human reality, a far more connected reality for everyone, for the adults and the children, than the traditional sage on the stage, so to speak, where there's a distance. There's literally a distance, a psychological and a physical distance between the teachers and the students, and you're not able to form as many of those real, deep human connections.
Yeah, I think about myself in college and how, maybe 1 hour of office hours built a stronger relationship than an infinite number of hours watching lecture, right? And if we can create more of those kinds of opportunities in classroom, relationships will definitely
A
flourish.
15-second one-on-one interaction could mean more than a term of sitting, being one of 300 people in a lecture hall. And I think we should optimize around that idea.
I love that. One of the things you hit on your answer, I would like to dig in a little bit deeper on, and that's thinking about student to student relationships. I think many of us have a stereotype about what blended learning or learning with technology looks like, and it's students with headphones on in front of a laptop and working silently and independently. But you kind of touched on some ideas about how learning with technology might actually foster group work and student relationships. What might that look like, and how have you seen that be successful?
Yeah. And to be clear, sometimes that alone time, maybe with headphones on, if you're deeply engaged in work, actually can be incredibly productive. I think all of us recognize times where we really were in the zone and we were learning a lot through actively trying things and getting feedback. But then there's a huge opportunity above and beyond that. If students are struggling with something, or if they've actually already mastered the concept, that they can then become something of a teaching assistant for their peers. And that builds all sorts of things. One, it allows you to build connections and relationships. Even in high school, where you're in a class of 30, I remember having 4 or 5 really good friends, and then there was about 24, 25 other people who I kind of knew, but I never really had a real interaction with them in a deeper way. If you're able to create these types of contexts, all of a sudden you form better connections. You're providing more personalized human support with each other. And obviously, when you talk about college, we all remember those 300-person lecture halls where you're like, we're full. It's a room full of people, but I feel very lonely right now because we're not able to connect with people. And we see over and over again this notion of students helping each other, working on things with each other. It gives them agency over themselves. It gives agency over other people. I think a lot of teenage angst is because we don't give them enough responsibility. In 300,000 years of the existence of human beings, most of that time, if you're 13, 14, 15 years old, you are a pseudo adult. You are treated with real responsibility, oftentimes over other younger tribe members, family members, whatever you want to call it. But in our current system, we don't give and we don't leverage, I would say. Not only do we not give the responsibility, we don't leverage the capability of young people to have that responsibility. When the pandemic hit, I started a new not-for-profit, very complementary to Khan Academy, called Schoolhouse.world. It's all around peer-to-peer tutoring. So how do you get free tutoring to as many kids around the planet as possible? Well, you leverage volunteership. And some of these volunteers are retired professors of physics, but some of them are really capable high school students. In fact, some of the highest rated tutors on that platform are high school students. And I think that's just an untapped resource that we can take us pretty far.
I love that. That's so cool. Just a couple more questions here. I wanted to think if I'm a teacher who's maybe struggling with students who have lots of learning gaps. We know that students have had very different experiences lately, and I'm trying to create a really personalized classroom, but I also want to make sure relationships are really being built and that we're really fostering that human connection. Is there one or two things that you'd encourage a teacher in that situation to try? What's an experiment or an idea? And I think it'd be great for you to even think about using Khan Academy here.
Yeah, at a meta level, even before talking about specifics of Khan Academy, and I think we've seen a lot of teachers over the pandemic, go in this direction because they realized just lecturing over Zoom for an hour wasn't really engaging a lot of folks, and so this notion of the teacher as creating the context and the prompts and the constraints, and then using most of the time for either a two-way dialogue between the teacher and the students, kind of Socratic style, where it's mainly the teacher asking questions and the students pushing their own thinking and each other's thinking, or heavy use of breakouts, where you can say, all right, y'all all attempted this individually. Now try to convince each other who's right, or try to explain the reasoning to each other. And I think what I just said is applicable in every subject. I
Yes.
also think mixing it up every now and then, making sure there is space for forming human connection. Every educator I talk to right now says, look, there's been learning loss or unfinished learning on the academic side, but they're even more worried about the social emotional side, which is harder to measure, but I think we all recognize is arguably far more important. If you're not in a good mental space, if you're not in a good social emotional space, it's going to be very hard to learn your math or improve your reading comprehension. And so make sure we have space and investment for that human connection. Honestly, just having the energy of kids getting excited about coming to the classroom changes their openness to the learning. Now, if you bring in Khan Academy, this is where I imagine doing what we were describing, where teachers can make assignments on Khan Academy, and even there, kids get immediate feedback. Teachers can understand where they are. When they come into class, they can have students try to reconcile their answers with each other, say, hey, you got this, you got that. You can group them in interesting ways. You can use some class time to give them more prompts that they can work on either individually or in groups. I'm a big fan of moving as close to personalization as student agency as possible. So provide maybe 1 day a week, 2 days a week, where you're like, okay, this is a time where it's going to be controlled chaos. All the students, I want you to finish unit 4, whatever we're working on. Work at your own time and pace. Try to get mastery on Khan Academy. I, as your teacher, I'm going to monitor where you are. I'm going to do focused small group interventions. I wouldn't say that way to students. I'm going to put you all into small groups and work on folks and different things. And I'm also going to try to pair y'all with each other or put y'all into small groups if I feel that y'all can help each other. I might anoint kind of team leads who I feel have already mastered a concept and can help bring other folks along. And I think, when we've seen that done in classrooms, the kids get excited, the teachers get excited, and we have over 50 efficacy studies, many of them in classrooms like this, that show that it really moves the dial.
I love that. And so actionable for the folks listening. Well, just one last question for you. So, we've talked about how teachers might grow and try new tactics and develop as an educator today. How have you grown as an educator since those days when you were tutoring your cousin over 15 years ago? What are some of the things that you've learned and grown in your own teaching style?
Yeah, when I started tutoring Nadia back in 2004, I think I was very, how would I say it? I was very focused on the skills and content, and that's important, right? I felt that there was a way that I had understood and the real deep intuition behind math, and it really served me well. And I saw my cousins memorizing formulas and memorizing facts. I'm like, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it, and it was able to help them. But as I've gone on this journey, and I've become a parent now, I have 3 kids, 12, 9, and 6 years old. I think the content is important, but I've become even a much bigger believer that even before you get to the content, you got to get people in the right headspace, so to speak. I realized even in hindsight with Nadia, the first 2 weeks, I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was really trying to deprogram some of her lack of self-esteem that she had developed, thinking that she wasn't good at math, et cetera, et cetera. And that really is the biggest barrier for a lot of kids, is that lack of self-esteem. Their identity has been shaped by things that and maybe they shouldn't have been shaped that way, and just making them have belief that if they're able to put the time in, that they will grow, and that it's actually interesting and beautiful to learn about all these topics. So with my own children and in our lab school and a lot of the work we do at Khan Academy, we do talk about how do we make sure we build student agency as we also empower them to learn more, or empower their teachers to assign things or leverage the tools in the classroom. How does that help create these metacognitive skills that might be as important or more important than factoring a polynomial?
That's such a good point. And thank you for everything you shared. I'm sure the teachers listening will have a lot to chew on and a lot to develop. I wish I could send this recording back to myself when I was in the classroom. I know I would have benefited from it greatly. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation, Sal. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Dan.